Deciding where to grow or move your business can be full of unexpected delays. Or you could just go to Ohio. With billions invested in shovel-ready sites, a dedicated team whose only job is to tackle red tape, and 0% corporate income tax, Ohio makes it easy for your business to scale faster. In fact, Ohio ranked number 2 in the U.S. for lowest cost of doing business multiple years in a row. Your move. Learn more at jobsohio.com.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to a very special Over the Net episode. We've got our crossover here today as we are joined not only by Matthew Gustafson, but Jeffrey Calhoun. We'll get into a little bit more of what they all do with their podcast, Service to 7. In addition, we will be joined by Aaron Siegel and Colin Simmons through videos. Real briefly, if you don't know me, my name is Dylan Heinrich. I am this year's Rock M volleyball writer, so I have been on the beat for this past season. Cover the ups and downs that have been going on. So we're going to talk a little bit about this season and what is next for Mizzou Volleyball going forward. Jeffrey, why don't you introduce yourself as the resident guest on this podcast?
Sounds good. Hi, everyone. My name is Jeffrey Calhoun. I'm a senior here at the University of Missouri and one of the hosts of Service to 7. I have been covering volleyball pretty heavily, I would say, for about 3 years. And really just fell in love with the sport around my sophomore year. I've appeared on a couple Rock M's things before, was part of the Mizzou women's basketball roundtable last year when the coaching search was going on. Love working with you guys and really excited to, hop on here and talk volleyball now.
Thank you. And we are, of course, joined by Matthew Gustafson.
Yep. The only, member who's part of both of the parts of this crossover. My name is Matthew Gustafson. I was the volleyball beat writer before Dylan. I am now the football men's basketball beat writer over here at Rock M Nation, and I've also been a co-host of Service to 7 for the last 2 years.
Wonderful. In addition, we will be joined by Aaron Siegel and Colin Simmons. Colin Simmons has been our secondary writer for Rock M, and Aaron Siegel has been another integral part of Service to 7. So they will be sending in their video clips, which we'll be playing right here.
Obviously, this season didn't meet expectations, but I wouldn't call it a failure exactly. The reality is that this team didn't have the same offensive firepower on both sides of the net as it did compared to last season. It's really hard to not compare this team and the players to last season's squad because we saw how they were able to make a deep run, and it makes sense when you think about it how this season's team couldn't replicate those results. Kaylin Alexander was a perfect replacement for Michael Vernon's production, but there wasn't an adequate replacement for Jordan Iliff, and that proved to be the difference. And once again, Sullivan and the coaching staff will have to replace that outside hitting production, most likely by hitting the portal or relying on internal development. I think rising sophomores like Paige Felder and Maka Labaglio should come back even stronger next season, but you're definitely going to need to have a couple of big-time commitments in the portal for this team to reach where it wants to be back in the tournament. And I think even somewhere like rising junior Claire Morrissey could play a factor. Very talented recruit coming out of high school, hasn't been able to show much. But I think someone like her could finally have an opportunity to step up after showing some promise. But this offseason, in my opinion, will be the biggest test of Sullivan's tenure with Mizzou. She's trying to replace so much roster talent and has to replace talent in her coaching staff as well. And so it's clearly going to be an uphill battle, but gaining a few big-time names in the portal and having that young depth step up could put this team back on the map in 2026.
Whoa, that was magical, guys. Anyways, we're back with your live discussion on a roundtable discussing Mizzou Volleyball. So, obviously, this has been what most people would agree the weakest year of the Dawn Sullivan era. Mizzou starts off really strong, loses a couple key games down the stretch, just barely misses the NCAA tournament, just left out of the first 4 out. We'll start with you, Jeffrey. Why don't you tell me a little bit about what you saw this season and I guess what felt different about this year's team?
I mean, there were a lot of things that just didn't feel like they were in full swing. It felt like most of the season, the team was just running at about 80% speed. I mean, part of that was confirmed to some extent. I mean, you saw Janet Demaray injured all throughout the year. You saw, Tyra Ariel obviously playing with a brace the entire year. Reagan Haith going in and out with a lot of injuries. Sickness plagued the locker room a few times. So at some points you did see that. But at the other end of things, I guess from my vantage point, some of the life, the electricity, the swagger that this team has had in the past with the likes of Colleen Finney, with Jordan Iliff, with Michael Vernon, while they were replaced and reloaded from a purely positional standpoint, it didn't feel like at times they were the same energy was brought in. And then you look at some of these games and it felt like, as much as I hate to agree with Aaron Siegel, the team, it felt like at times went a little bit one-dimensional. Last year with that 1-2 punch of Finney and Haith, you saw the middles run the offense quite a bit. Obviously, you have one of the best opposite hitters in the conference with Jordan Iliff. But this year, it just didn't feel like it was there. It took some time to figure out who that opposite hitter was going to be. About halfway through the year, it ended up being sealed as Maka Labaglio, which I think is the right pick. But anytime you have a true freshman come into a role like that, it's difficult. And it didn't feel like the middles were utilized as much, which is strange because, Haith returned, and then trading Tyra Ariel for Colleen Finney, I mean, I think there's an argument to be made that Ariel is as good of a middle blocker as Colleen Finney was. I think they're very, very different middle blockers, but, you boil it down to, skill level, I think it was pretty even. And the offense just wasn't run through them. It felt like it was just a simple run through Kaylin Alexander most of the time. And when it worked, it worked. But when it didn't, it didn't. And teams were able to read that really, really well. And, they got read 11 times, and, that's why they missed the tournament.
Matthew, what are your thoughts from the season so far? Obviously, you followed it very closely.
Yeah, this was a team that fell far short of its potential. You look at the talent they had entering this year, this was arguably the most talented team, and I thought the deepest team of the Don Sullivan era. You look at it, you were returning a player, Maya Sands, who I believe is going to win National Libero of the Year. You return an All-SEC setter in Marina Crownover. You brought in Tyra Ariel from USC. You brought in an All-American, honorable mention All-American, and last year's national leader in kills, Kaylin Alexander. The talent was absolutely there, but you didn't see it enough. You didn't see it very often put together on the floor for Mizzou. Obviously, you had those several upsets that were just killer for their tournament hopes down the stretch. Anytime that you lose to Vanderbilt, you lose to Ole Miss, and there were a couple of other upsets, of course, over the course of the season. You're not going to make the tournament in all likelihood. I think that overall the SEC was probably undervalued by the committee this year, given that it has 2 teams in the Final Four, had 3 teams in the Elite Eight, which is impressive considering that I believe the SEC had only 5 teams in the entire NCAA tournament. So I think that the conference's strength was undervalued and other conferences maybe a little bit overvalued. That being said, the number of bad losses the team had made it a very, very difficult task to get into the NCAA tournament. And again, it was a matter of not living up to that team's potential too many times in order to make it in.
Yeah, 100%. When I noticed, again, you talked about all those upsets, a big part of it is it came at the very end of the year, and so when you are losing games to Alabama, Ole Miss, Vanderbilt, especially in that last month, the committee is definitely going to value that a lot. So it was just unfortunate timing to kind of end the year on a slump instead of ending it on a high note, which is kind of what we saw the previous year. Now that this year's kind of wrapped up, obviously we are well underway with off-season news. It has already been announced that 2 assistant coaches, Colin Irons and Jenna Gabriel, are leaving. the Mizzou program. Jenna Gabriel has already announced to go to Arizona. I don't believe Irons has announced where he is heading yet. Plus, the transfer portal has left a lot of people. I believe it's over 700 in NCAA volleyball, period. And specifically for Mizzou, they have lost several key pieces. It's nuts. Specifically, like Matthew mentioned, all SEC setter Marina Crownover. With this high turnover rates, what are you guys kind of noticing, I guess, just from what to expect out of this team going forward? Because, again, there's going to be a lot of new faces between graduating, new assistant coaches, and, of course, the portal.
I think for me, my biggest question is who is going to step up as that lead vocal leader? Because at the beginning of the Dawn Sullivan era, it very much felt like Jordan Iliff was that number one option. And then last year, you really saw Colleen Finney come into her own with that. I think she had the gumption and the ability to do it in year one, but anytime you're, year one of a program, that's going to be tough. And then last year really was Maya Sands and Janet Demaray. And, Matthew Aaron and I talked about this on Service to 7, literally 5 minutes before Marina Crownover announced her transferring. It felt like the only one of those kind of leader core players left was Crownover. And now she's gone. You look at who is currently listed on the roster. The only seniors are Kamani Johnson and Kaylin Rush. Neither of those players have gotten a lot of substantial playing time. Sierra Dudley is a redshirt junior, but as fantastic of a leader as she has been and as fantastic as a player as she's been, she hasn't played in a year and a half. So I think that's my biggest question. Even if they bring in a serious leader in the portal, becoming the voice of that locker room in year one with a team is incredibly difficult. And you don't see that all that often in any sport. So that is my biggest thing. This team also right now is, from a number standpoint, is small. You graduate 5 seniors. You got 4 players hopping the portal. Right now, your signing class, I believe there's 4 new players. And so now you're at 14 players. And there's a lot of holes that need to be filled. Dawn Sullivan has done fantastic things in the portal. So I can almost guarantee that this, there's going to be more players. But that's something that's going to, I think, need to be hit harder than it ever has in the past. Because, I'm not going to say harder than it ever has been in the past, because year one she had to hit it pretty hard. But especially harder than last year. Because really, I would say the only blockbuster transfer was Tyra Ariel. You could make an argument for Kaylin Alexander, but I think the way that panned out, whatever the reason may be, was not what everyone expected it to be. I don't think she performed to the level that she did at Hawaii the year before. But you're gonna need more than one. You're gonna need more than 2 substantial transfers to really help this team next year.
Yeah, right now, again, you have multiple areas that you're going to need to take from the transfer portal. I think that you're likely good at setter. Obviously, Crownover is a big loss. She was one of the best setters in the SEC. That being said, you brought in a player last year with international experience, Nina Mandovich, who got playing time this year. And you also have Sierra Dudley, who, though she hasn't started the last 2 years, was a starter on a tournament team back in 2023 and was part of the SEC all-freshman team. So I would be a little bit surprised to see them bring in a setter, especially considering that you're adding one in the incoming freshman class. What you're going to need is at least one middle, because you have your 2 starters graduating. Trinity Luckett, who I think a lot of us expected to take that next step into that starting role next year, is also transferring out. So the majority of your middles right now are either sophomores, juniors who have not had much playing time at the position. Kamani Johnson is an option, though she's mainly played right side during her collegiate career. And you have 2 true freshmen with middle blockers, who are going to come in. So you don't have anybody who you know for sure can start at an SEC level. Right side, you're good. You have Maklabaglia returning. You're going to need at least one hitter. There are a lot of talented hitters on this team, but they're also very young, very inexperienced, and again, haven't had success in the SEC yet. And I think that if you're looking to get back to the NCAA tournament, which I believe this team is going to want to do, that's obviously the main goal for pretty much most teams, is to make the NCAA tournament, so I don't think that's too crazy to say. You probably don't want to have more than one hitter spot filled by somebody who has not had starting experience. The other one for me to look out for, this one a bit more of a question mark, do they bring somebody in at libero/defensive specialist? Obviously, Zoe Matias-Lopez was sensational as a freshman in that defensive specialist role. And I think that she is going to be a very natural successor to Maya Sands at the libero position. Then at DS, if they want to continue having somebody who plays a larger role at that spot, your options right now are Kaylin Rush, or to bring in and transfer. Kaylin Rush has some experience. She's been a serving sub in the past, but hasn't really played a major role as a defensive specialist. So do you feel confident with her development at that position, or do you want to bring in somebody with some experience?
Good point bringing up what they're going to need in the transfer portal as well. Personally, I do think that Zoe Matias-Lopez can hold down that libero position, and I think that this team would be just fine without a defensive specialist. Obviously, having ZML and Maya Sands on the court at the same time helped their defense, yes, but it didn't give you as many offensive options, which I think definitely hurt them, put a lot of stress on Kaylin Alexander. So I'm always one to type up ZML, but I want to hear from you guys. Who are some returners that you think could either step into a bigger role or you're expecting to, I guess, kind of see a jump from as we head into this year? Like you said, there's not a lot of senior leadership. There's a lot of players with inexperience, but who do you think is someone who, I guess, can kind of take that next step and jump into a bigger role that's coming back this year?
I'm really excited to see Sierra Dudley this year. I mean, honestly, I think that we're going to see a much bigger role from her because, you know, Dawn Sullivan herself admitted in a number of interviews that the reason that she would bring in Mandovich was to slow down the pace of the game, which was necessary at certain points. I think that while Sierra Dudley and Marina Crownover play very different, I think that they are used for similar situations. I think that Sierra Dudley helps with that faster pace. And I think that Sierra Dudley will be slotted into where Marina Crownover was these last couple of years. And we know how good Sierra Dudley has been. Matthew touched on all of those notes. You know, I don't know the reason she hasn't transferred. You know, obviously when you get into you know, more non-revenue sports, transferring becomes less and less about the actual sport, so it's harder to speculate, and I'm not going to, but I'm happy she stayed. I mean, she's a dog. She's fantastic, and I really think she'll jump back in. The other one is I'm really excited to see what Kaylin Rush does. I honestly think Kaylin Rush is a dog. I mean, listen, she's the daughter of Kareem Rush. That genetics right there already proves how talented she is. But I think that, you know, the problem, and this is a good problem to have if you're Missouri fans, is that libero room has been absolutely loaded. I mean, you had Maya Sands, you know, walk into the conference and steal pretty much every award she could. And this year again, I mean, you look at Maya Sands and you look at the other liberos that are in the conversation. You know, I don't see anyone that is going to win that award but her. And so that's just pushed Kaylin Rush further down the depth chart. But she came in at a few points this year and played solid. And I think getting reps in that one spot, you know, I really think that we'll see Zoe Matias-Lopez be that number one option. I mean, she proved herself as an absolute elite libero. You know, I think we'll see Zoe Matias-Lopez slot into that Maya Sands role and Kaylin Rush slot into that Zoe Matias-Lopez role. And I think that Rush is really going to step up.
So, I mean, Jeffrey, you touched on it, obviously, with Sierra Dudley. Just to underline, I mean, she is an SEC starting level center. We've seen that before. she was a starting level setter as a freshman. And so you would have to imagine, obviously, with multiple years of development, that she has only improved since that point. So I don't think that there's too much concern at the setter position. Now, you asked for people who could maybe take that next step. I'm going to point out two different people. And these are both hitters who impressed me, who stood out to me for their arms. They have cannons for arms at the outside and right side hitter positions, respectively. Macalabaglio obviously already locked down that starting role this year at right side. Somebody who came in with international experience from Argentina, played on the national team there. And really, her main asset this year was defense. I think that she added a lot to the team's blocking up front and was relatively efficient on offense as the year went on, but didn't really have a starting role. I'd expect to see her role in the offense increase next year. And on the other side, you saw more of Paige Felder this year. With the players currently on the roster, I would be pretty surprised if Paige Felder is not a starter for that team next season.
No, and I'm totally with you. I mean, I don't think with who was there at outside hitter, I don't think anyone, I mean, I don't want to get inside of people's heads, but I don't think anyone, including herself, really expected her to start. But she had the arm. She really did have the arm. She had the offensive prowess, no question. The thing that I don't want to say like I'm concerned about, that's just simply not there yet, and I think a lot of it is just youth, is the defense. I think that's why Demaray was a stronger option, is I think that Demaray had a stronger defensive standing and defensive ability. It just wasn't there for Paige Felder. I'm very excited to see how that develops. And I think you're right. I think that she is going to be the full-time starter at outside. She started a number of games this year when Demaray was battling injuries. So, yeah, I really like that take. I think that she's going to do very well.
Now, I know we've talked a lot about rooms to improve, but as a whole, it's kind of nice to sit back and see where this team is at 17-11. And yes, you missed the NCAA tournament, but having this be your standard for a down year, it's pretty nice that this is the standard that Mizzou Volleyball has under Dawn Sullivan. Obviously, Laird Veach would agree. They just signed her to an extension through, I believe it's 2029, if I'm not mistaken. So another good deal for Miss Sullivan. Go chase that bag, queen. But with that being said, obviously, you're going to need a lot of retooling in the portal. You're going to need see a lot of production next year. But what do you think is the expectation, both inside and outside the team, for Mizzou heading into this 2026 season?
You know, that's really hard to answer, in my opinion, because I think there's a lot of unanswered questions, and you know, it's still going to be nearly a year before that season starts, but there's a lot of variety in the needs and the holes for this team. You know, on one end, you look at libero, you look at defensive specialist, and they're good. Like, they're locked in, they're ready to go. I feel like the same thing with setter. But I mean, you look at middles, you look at hitters, there's some questions. You know, another thing I noticed, Matthew, as I was scrolling through this, Kamani Johnson is no longer officially listed as a middle blocker. And when I saw that, I honestly kind of gasped at myself for a second. I was like, she ever a middle blocker? And went back. She, the last roster, she was listed as right side middle blocker, but this year's or for 2026, she's listed as a right side outside hitter. So there's that. So, right now the options for middle blocker are Tia Finesi, who has not had a ton of playing time, and then the women that are coming in this new class. They do bring in 2 middle blockers, which is great, with Eva Smith and with Millie Bauer. But, do you really want, especially if you run a 2 middle system like you have the last few years, you're going to be running with a redshirt sophomore who's barely had any playing time and a true freshman. That's a lot of pressure. And, as far as right side, while Maka Labaglio and Grace O'Reilly, I think, are solid, you do worry about that with the youth. So to get back to your original question, the expectation, frankly, for me, it's about the same as it ended this year. I think that next year this team is going to be a bubble team. I hate to say it, especially with how high expectations were for this team. But this team, it kind of felt like it was like they had to carry the momentum over from the year before. 2 years ago, I mean, I think they blew expectations out of the water. That team should have been ranked, I think, pretty much all year. Were really disrespected by the committee. Beat Texas on the road. Went round for round and took down Tennessee and had some very, very solid wins. And then obviously went to the Sweet 16. Were the only team that wasn't a 1 seed that knocked off a 2 seed. And then this year, committee gave them a lot of grace. The polls gave them a lot of grace, and they didn't take advantage of it. And it didn't feel like they carried that momentum from the year before. So, I mean, again, if I'm going to be honest, I think we're looking at about the same. I think that this is a team that, once again, come Selection Sunday next year, they're going to be holding their breath.
Yeah, this is likely to be a transition year. I think that we haven't really seen under Don Sullivan the transition yet that you see from a lot of coaches from the first couple of years, where you have a lot of transfers starting, to your homegrown talent, the players that you brought in as recruits, forming the core of your roster. That's a transition that needs to be made. Building a roster through the portal is not very often sustainable. SMU does it, but they're really the one main example of a team that's having a lot of success building through the portal. And even SMU's had more limited success in the tournament compared to the regular season. So next year, you're likely to see at least 3 sophomores, if not more, starting, I think, for this team. And with that, there come more question marks, because, again, you're not going to have as many players who have SEC starting experience and who have experience starting for Mizzou. So I think that somewhere, again, like Jeffrey's saying, around that tournament is likely to be the expectation. I think that you don't want to take a step back from this year. Ideally, you take a step forward if you're the program. But really, the key for next year is going to be making that transition where you have the core of your roster, your best players, be players that you brought in during high school recruiting. And so individual development, developing those homegrown players, is going to be the most important thing this offseason and next year for Mizzou.
100%. I will say one small caveat is, obviously there's a lot of sophomores. There's a lot of juniors on this team who still, I think, will need some time to grow into that role, who literally might just need that one more year. I still think there is definitely room for a couple additions in the portal, especially if we're talking middle blockers, outside hitters. And again, if you can get some big splashes in the portal, like we talked Michael Vernon or Kalen Alexander, these are some extremely talented players who join the Mizzou team, and maybe they're not going to need a number 1 option, but they're definitely going to need a number 2. They're going to need starters or people with starter potential who have played NCAA college ball. So luckily, it's, like Jeffrey said, it's kind of hard to evaluate this team where we are currently right now in mid-December, but come January, February, when that roster finally starts to become finalized, we can hear more about the freshmen, we can hear more about whatever transfer Sullivan's bringing in. Then I think, again, it's that clearer picture, but again, it's very clear where this tournament, where this team wants to be, and that's in the tournament. They want to be competing for a tournament spot every single year, which, again, I think is some really good progress for this team. So, again, a lot of it's going to come down to development and recruitment, which, I mean, that's the main 2 things. So, I think Sullivan's got it in her. It's definitely proven to be the case recently. Perfect. Those are all the questions I have.
I know we're really looking forward.
Sorry.
I was going to say, I think that one thing that, this is really looking forward to the future is, while I am a little bit nervous about the 2026 season, the 2027 season brings a lot of hope for me. I know that sounds insane, but you look at this current roster, there's only 1 player that's going to be out of eligibility this year, and that's Kaylin Rush. There's only 2 seniors on this roster. That's her and that's Kamani Johnson. This last year, you graduated 5 players. 3 of them were not, players that had been there for more than a year. The year before, you graduated technically 6, players, you also had Sarah White, who everyone thought was out of eligibility and then was like, LOL, I'm going to South Florida, which was still weird. I thought she was out of eligibility. But you got, a lot of players left, and a lot of those players that graduated were heavy hitters. 2 years ago, Iliff and Finney obviously being the main ones. Last year, Sands especially, and Janet Demeray. This year, again, as great as I think Kaylin Rush is, your one guaranteed loss is a player that might not even start. So you look at the way that I think she's going to develop these players, bring in these new classes. 2 years from now, I think this team is going to be very, very special.
Perfect. Anyone else have any other final thoughts while we got you here? Sweet. Awesome. Thank you both so much for your time. Thanks, of course, to Jeffrey and then Aaron for sending in his video. Colin and Matthew are always great additions. This was a lot of fun. Obviously, volleyball has become one of the most exciting teams to keep an eye on day in and day out. So keep an eye on both Service to 7 and Rock M Nation for all your Mizzou volleyball updates. Thank you so much for your time, and have a great rest of your December.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to Rock M Radio, a proud partner of Fans First Sports Network. Rock M Radio is the official podcast network of Rock M Plus, a new and exciting subscription service provided by me and the other voices of Rock M Radio. Please take a few moments to head over to rockm.plus and sign up for an account today. The cost is only $5 a month, and benefits include access to our live podcast, a subscriber-only message board, weekly newsletters, and more. If you enjoyed this episode of Rock M Radio and would like to see more just like it beamed directly into your personal device, make sure to click the subscribe button below and tell your friends. Our podcast feed is available through the Apple Podcast app for iPhone, Google Podcast app for Android, whatever app you listen to your podcast. You can also find Rock M Radio on Spotify. If you're looking for a podcast about your favorite team that is not Missouri Tigers, Fan First Sports Network is your answer. A full podcast network loaded with the team-specific podcasts covering Major League Baseball, the NFL, NHL, NBA, MLS, and more. And we'll be back with more episodes of Rock M Radio coming to you soon.
Deciding where to grow or move your business can be full of unexpected delays. Or you could just go to Ohio. With billions invested in shovel-ready sites, a dedicated team whose only job is to tackle red tape, and 0% corporate income tax, Ohio makes it easy for your business to scale faster. In fact, Ohio ranked number 2 in the U.S. for lowest cost of doing business multiple years in a row. Your move. Learn more at jobsohio.com.